It's time for breaking bread with Papa. Hey, don't you know? Hey, it's our goal. Hey, it's time for breaking bread with Papa. Hey, don't you know? Hey, it's also a show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Breaking Bread with Tom Papa. I am Tom Papa. Thank you so much for joining us once again here at the table. We've got a good one for you today. We've got Gesine Bullock-Prado, who is a very talented chef who has a new book, My Vermont Table, that is actually a New York Times bestseller. Sorry, I'm a little stuffed up. Can you hear it? I'm a little stuffed up because of my travels, which I'll tell you about in 1 second. But Gesine is a great person, a very talented. This is her 7th book, 6th cookbook, pastry chef. This book brings us through all the seasons of Vermont. She is related to Sandra Bullock's sister. She lived in LA for a long time working on films and things, and then escaped to Vermont and followed her passion of baking and cooking and just living that kind of a life. And can't wait to get into it with her because there's so many things about her life that are very appealing. So I can't wait for you all to hear that. It's going to be much fun. We would like to thank the good people at Aura. Aura, they've been on with us before. They're a great company. They take all of your personal information that's out there that anyone can find. Data brokers scrape public tax records and sell that information legally, making it accessible to anyone. And for a limited time, Aura is offering our listeners a 14-day trial, plus a check of your data to see if your personal information has been leaked online. All for free when you visit aura.com, A-U-R-A, aura.com/papa. That's aura.com/papa to sign up for a 14-day free trial and start protecting you and your loved ones. My wife just went through some of this stuff, and it's never fun. So it's nice to have a company like Aura watching your back. So, yes, I'm a little stuffed up. Not a big deal. I'm not here to complain about a cold. I wouldn't even call it a cold. I've just been yapping a lot today. But after my passport showed up in the last second, literally the last second, the car was waiting and the FedEx guy walked up and gave us the passport. And we were able to go to Paris and London and see my daughter and have a good spring break. And holy cow, man, oh man, oh man. This is my first time in both places. I know. Well, come on, Tom. How could you not have been? I've been places. I go places. But for some reason, never hit those. And I knew comedically I had a show in London. I knew I was going to love it there and it was going to be a great place for comedy. I was correct. And I also knew that Paris had to be one of the greatest places on earth for food. Just from everybody in my life, every book I've ever read, a fan of Jim Harrison, that great writer. And man, when he talks about knocking around Paris and eating these gigantic lunches. So I recruited everybody that I could. Our good friend Phil Rosenthal, he's been on our program before from Everybody Loves Raymond and Somebody Feed Phil and on the Netflixes, and a great guy. And I just asked him for a couple recommendations to go eat in Paris. And between the restaurants that he sent me to and just wandering down the streets, you can't fail. Like, I know this is nothing new. I mean, someone talking about the great food in Paris is nothing new. But to actually experience it and realize it far surpasses what you expect. Like, there's no way you can walk out of your hotel and not run into something great, like just a simple croissant or a baguette or a pastry or an espresso. Or, I mean, it's a wonderland. It really is a wonderland. And the respect that they have for it of doing something really well and taking pride in that is just, it comes through in everything. Everything. I went to this restaurant called L'Ami Louis, and I went there for lunch. It's a 14-seat restaurant, very expensive. Went for lunch, as I said. Dinner, I don't think we could even have gotten in for dinner, but I figured if I'm going to have something, and it was very meat based, uh, you know, waiters who just make their career out of being waiters, real pride, small place. I was the only English speaking person in the place. Uh, I just felt like take your time, go for lunch, because I had my family with me. My wife was a trooper, supported me as a vegetarian. She came along and shocked the world by eating snails. She's, we've been at the Jersey Shore with a lot of seafood, and she's not into it. And then she was better at scooping the snails out than I was, taking those escargot and the contraptions. And I literally was like, this is empty. There's nothing in it. And she would take it and in 2 seconds pull this giant snail out, just smothered in basil and garlic and butter. Oh my God. Had this duck, had this asparagus. I'm not even going to tell you the price of just the asparagus. This great bottle of wine. And man, I mean, it was just everything you could fantasize about eating lunch in a tiny, just French forward place. Oh my God. I have to say, one of the best meals of all time. A bottle of wine in the middle of the day does not hurt your analysis for sure. But man, was it good. I had uh great little brasseries, and we went, which I tried to eat where and drink where like Hemingway was hanging out. I was just trying to soak it all in. But man, the food, every place you went, my daughters were really into finding places for brunch where we could go and they could get their teas and macarons and just be in elegant little tea rooms and stuff like that. And man, I could see why when you're not there, you would just fantasize about going. Uh, a lot of times people say they go over to Europe and they eat a whole bunch and they come back and they lost weight because the food is all real. And while I did not feel bad after meals, as I will sometimes here, definitely did not lose weight. Definitely, uh, this is a fatter Tom talking for sure. London helped. It didn't help. I mean, their food is so bad, but their pubs are so great that you're just substituting beer for and that English breakfast thing, giant sausages, and I don't think anyone really eats that. I think it's just a con job for Americans or for tourists. But I ate it. I ate it all, and I rolled back into town. But man, London for the comedy. I did a show in Paris. It was an English speaking show, and it was just small. I just wanted to be able to say I performed in Paris. So I went and did a 15, 20-minute spot on this guy's show, and Sebastian Marks, and he was kind enough to put me on, and it was fun, and it was very cool, but not at the level of what a London show is. That's just, I mean, in the theater district, Leicester Square. I will definitely go back to the UK just for comedy. I mean, and beer and the people. I mean, I don't mean to shit on it, but I'm talking about food. And this is not actually Veer Das, a great comedian from India, gave me a recommendation for Indian food in London, and that was one of the best meals of the trip. Dishoom, and there's like 6 of them, but super legit. And that place was just popping, very contemporary, filled with beautiful people. And you needed someone from India to come in and reverse conquer Britain. And man, that was a great meal. So a big thank you to Veer Das and Phil Rosenthal. How great that all these funny people are leading the way to get me fed in all the best ways. Okay, now Gesine Bullock-Prado, very talented chef. I really want to just explore how someone goes from LA show business. And this is like whenever I talk about like just working a bagel shop down at the beach, she kind of did it. She just decided, I'm going to change my life and follow my passion in baking and food arts and go live in another place that makes me happy. And so I'm excited that she's going to share the journey. And also, you should go get her book, My Vermont Table, which is a national New York Times bestseller right now. And we're lucky to have her. So enjoy. Gesine Bullock-Prado. All right, we'll jump in.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for being here. This is a
My
real
pleasure.
treat. A real treat. There are three little fantasies in my mind that you are living out.
Okay, good. Excellent. Excellent.
It's not going to be as dirty as it sounds.
all PG, I hope.
Yeah. Leaving LA for Vermont.
Yeah, happened. Yes.
It's a big one.
Two things.
Opening, I'm not sure for how long, but opening a bakery.
Yep.
And then becoming obsessed with maple syrup. All things maple.
All ticked off. Correct.
Yeah, these are all things that have always been on my mind. So let's start with the first one, and I'm kind of gonna be probing and seeing if this is if I should follow in your footsteps.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent.
All right. So you're living in LA. You're in movie business.
Yeah.
You're working with and without your sister, I imagine. And how long did you do that for? How long were you in LA?
I was in LA for about 10 years. First I started law school. I went to law school, took the bar, all that.
Nice.
I passed the bar on the first go because I didn't study. I baked instead.
Really?
Yeah. I was the most relaxed human there during the test.
How'd you have the guts?
Baking.
How'd you have the guts to do that?
It's my procrastinating technique. I did that all through college, all through law school. When I'm stressed, I bake, and it was just, that's the thing I do.
Amazing.
And then we worked together for years and years at Fortis Films.
Wow. So as a lawyer?
Well, I developed films there and produced films and some TV. We like George Lopez, the George Lopez show.
Oh man, as a comedian, that is a legendary story of your sister plucking George out of the clubs and anointing him for television. Every comedian walks around thinking, when is a movie star going to save my life? So were you happy in LA? I mean, you were hustling and doing all that stuff, but you were baking.
I didn't like it. I did not like it.
Never liked it.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I made some of my best friends for life. I met my husband. He was working in the industry. He still does. The family that I love so much is there. There's so much like some of the food, like restaurants I miss, because here you're kind of responsible for your own eating most of the time. There's not a lot of restaurants here because there's so few people. What are you gonna do? But there was something I was really missing. I was missing seasons. I grew up in both Germany and in Virginia, and there were things that I just wanted a more full life. I wanted all the seasons. I wanted we all know what the focus is in LA, and that focus just really just wasn't my thing. I was focused literally on cooking, baking, and community. And so when I found Vermont, my husband actually took me to a football game in New Hampshire at Dartmouth College. And the two are, right next to each other, like just kissing. Yeah. And so we went across the river into Vermont, and you would think that being so close together that they are so similar, but they're really quite different. And my heart just exploded.
Yeah.
I was like, it's what I didn't know that I was looking for. which is such a wonderful and strange thing to feel. They were like, oh, there you are. It's kind of like finding my true love in my husband. It was like, ah,
Yeah,
there you are.
right.
And it kind of all came together, together, the two of them.
That is an
And
amazing
yeah,
thing. I had that same thing. I had a motorcycle for years, and driving through New Hampshire, like what was it,
the
the
White
White
Mountains. Yeah,
Mountains,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's very nice, but as soon as you cross the border, you're you know
Yeah, you do. It's
instantly
crazy.
I'm in Vermont.
It is. And I'm doing all these talks with the book, talking to people about, like, outside of Vermont. But when you get to Vermont and you talk about this, everyone just is nodding their head, because something just shakes off. Like the
Yeah,
second you cross the border, something just shakes loose, and you just breathe, and you're like, okay, it's going to be fine.
yeah,
I'm in Vermont. And
yeah,
there's the Von Trapps, there's a reason that after all the hell they went through, including the singing
right.
together, that sounds like a certain kind of hell to me.
Yeah,
They found Vermont, and the family is still here. And there's
right.
something to that. There's something, because they were also, Alp family, and I grew up some in the Alps. And, there's something here that the little villages are reminiscent of the Alps, and how they're
Mm-hmm.
really pretty and pristine,
Yeah,
but they're useful. People use them. It's not like Disneyland.
right,
It's
right.
like a community place. So it's
Yeah,
just, it's beautiful. And baking is kind of in the blood here. Bread and baking are in everyone's blood in Vermont.
yeah. God, it's that part of it is so like I said, one of my fantasies when I'm a bread baker,
Yeah, I
and
know. Yeah.
I bake like crazy, and it's really funny because I bake more than we eat, and I'm like the weird guy in the
This is why I had to
neighborhood.
leave LA.
Right. And I bring it to neighbors, and I know for a fact they're not eating all the bread I'm dropping off because they don't eat bread. They're like
Yes,
that's a
yes.
carb.
Oh.
I'm not eating. Oh God.
That's exactly right. Well, I'm so lucky that my colleague and mentor is Jeffrey Hamelman, who literally wrote the book Bread, literally.
Yeah.
And he's the coach of America's bread team when they go to the World Cup of Bread. And he's my neighbor, and he's my friend, and
Whoa.
he and I both taught. I still teach at King Arthur. We actually both still teach at King Arthur Flour, but he's the one who started up their bakery, their retail bakery, and their education center. And we've been colleagues now for some 20 years.
What?
And it's just, I mean, when you're that close with the bread guy of
Yeah.
America, it's just,
Jeez.
there's nothing like it. He's just an extraordinary human. And there's a reason that he chose Vermont too. It's like, I'm telling you, you gotta
Yeah.
come.
I
The
know.
yeasty beasties here are in the air.
What is there one thing that stands out that he changed in your approach to bread? I mean, I know it's
Uh,
a
there's there's uh, there's a gentleness about him, but also a rigidity to him as well.
uh-huh.
He's such a disciplined human. Like we've literally taught side by side, and it's so much fun. But his approach, he and I have a very similar approach to the way we teach baking, in that we want to give all the information, and we want to give you the whys. Because a
Yeah.
lot of things people just tell you to do something, they don't tell you why you're doing it. And I find that just so it's, first of all, it's infantilizing people, but it's
Yeah.
also, it won't allow them to move on with their baking or whatever they're
Hmm.
doing. It's like, if you
Yeah.
tell them why, the kind of the chemistry or the science behind it, they'll know more. But I remember we were doing a French bread survey for professionals, and someone said, really just tell me when do I know that the bread is proofed? And he goes like this. I was like, this is why I love him. This is why he's so great, because he tells you the truth. He's like, it's one of those things, you just have to live with the bread and get to know the bread and know how it feels and what it looks like and
Yeah.
what the ambient temperature is and what your hydration is. It's like, but I love that he had no answer for them. He's like, he didn't say you're shit out of luck, but he
Yeah.
essentially said that. He essentially did. He's like, you just got
Yeah.
to keep doing this to know. And that's
Yeah.
that made me so happy that there was no, there's so much certainty in what we do, but he was very confident in telling someone, it's like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, that is a very, there is the handling of bread, the handling of dough when you are first starting out. It's a big sloppy mess. It's sticking to your
Yeah.
hands, and then all of a sudden, and I'd watch people live or on YouTube, and they're
Yeah.
even more hydrated, and it's not sticking to them at all. And I'm
Yeah.
like, how? And then just through repetition and years, all of a sudden you find yourself able to do it, and
Yeah.
without anything other than time and practice.
That's it. It's the practice, practice, practice. And in teaching, people get very frustrated that they're not able to immediately replicate the thing that you're showing them. I mean, they're right there in the room. They're like, why, when I'm doing exactly what they think is exactly like, why is it not happening? And it's just like, first of all, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, and know that I've been doing this for ever. I feel like I've
Yeah,
been doing it for a lifetime.
yeah,
Someone like Jeffrey, it's watching his hands is such a, like, I could just put a camera on his hands and I'll just
yeah.
sit and be happy.
That's
And we do that for each other, like with me with the pastry side and him with the bread side. Though I am a bread person, I'm not like him.
yeah.
That we will happily just sit and watch each other teach and just be in a cozy corner.
It's really interesting you say that about the hands, because when I was watching some of your videos the other night, I literally wrote it down, hands. Your
Yeah.
hands are so uh they're so confident.
Yeah.
They're soft, but they're confident. Like your motions, like just, just from trying all of these things,
Hmm.
uh it was really your hands. I could literally just watch your hands.
Yeah. And the same for me when I'm watching the great bakers. It's gentleness and confidence. It's the curvature of the hand. When I teach something like strudel dough, I get such a kick out of it because I tell the beginning of the process, you are just a murderer. You just have to like slam that dough around just to get the gluten development. But when you're actually stretching the dough, you have to be a complete supplicant. It's like you have to essentially be in a monastery, and kind of getting people through those phases and going, just allow this to be your time to get all your aggression out in the beginning.
Hmm.
And then when we're pulling the dough, just be soft. And I explain to people that it's like, just be okay with the fact that what you're telling your hands to do isn't necessarily what your hands are going to do.
Hmm.
Because they
Yeah.
say have soft hands, and all of a sudden people are thinking soft hands and stretch, so they end up doing this and they stretch their hands, and they're like, I'm like, you're not doing jazz hands, don't do the jazz hands. But it's like, I totally understand what they're doing. They're like,
Yeah.
they're trying to do, like, they're patting their heads and they're rubbing their belly. But it's one of those
Yeah.
things that if you just have to have soft hands.
Yeah. No, I really, I watching it was just, it was elegant. It really was. So wait, so when you I want to go back to when you started baking, but I'm going to stick with Vermont for a second.
Yeah.
So when you leave LA and you pack up all your stuff and you're like, I'm really doing it, uh, and you have that first year in Vermont, and I know that your book is broken down into the 6 seasons of Vermont. Uh, I was touring last year, and I was there, stayed in a bed and breakfast, and I learned for the first time that they have mud season. That
Yes.
this that
Yeah.
this, that this was mud season. What was that first year like? Was it as idyllic as you thought, or were you so excited that it carried you through, or did you have moments in the middle of the winter thinking, "What have I done?"
No, there was not a moment where I wasn't so pleased that we had done it. And I love weather. I love
Yeah.
winter. I get really disappointed if it starts snowing in the beginning of the day, if it doesn't continue being the same throughout. Like if it stops snowing and then it gets sunshiny, I get really grumpy about it because
Yeah.
I'm like, I was promised a storm.
Yeah.
I wanted
I want,
to keep snowing.
yeah.
I mean, I love it, but it's one of the great things about having the seasons as we do. And we're just coming out of mud season right now, is that towards the end of winter, when you're getting a little prickly, you're like, I need it to
Yeah.
stop. That's when the thaw starts to happen. And that's when you start making maple syrup. And that's when the woods are filling with that scent
Mhm.
of that sweet. It's like, oh, pancakes must be near, because you can smell maple
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's mud season because the majority of our roads still in Vermont are dirt.
Mhm.
We're incredibly rural. I don't think that surprises anyone. So what that means is that when the thaw happens, we get these ruts in the roads that are incredibly dangerous, and it's like far more catastrophic to drive here during mud season than during a snow season.
Right.
easy. You know,
Yeah.
we talk about the roads like we talk about the weather during mud seasons, like don't go down there.
Right.
But and people have been stuck for days
Oh, geez.
because they just can't get their car out, they can't get their wheels out. But there's a camaraderie to that. People are
Mhm.
I call Vermont, you know, so my husband always says, what's Northern hospitality? And I always say, it's leave me alone, how can I help? That it is, you know, there's a curmudgeonliness and kind of this isolation kind of component to it. But the second someone needs anything, you're there.
Right.
And
Right.
and so if you're stuck in the mud, someone's going to be there. Someone's going to be there to help.
What's your favorite season?
Whatever season I'm in. I
Really?
like right now, mud season, we sugar and you collect the sap, and it's just you make donuts and you make sugar on snow and eat pickles, and everyone is just like you know, everyone's in shorts even if it's like 40 degrees out, like
Yeah.
flip-flops around. Whoa. uh, and now that we're heading into spring, I'm getting my garden ready. The ephemerals are just starting to come out. So my ramps, I transplanted some ramps from a secret bog, and they're
Ooh,
coming up, and I'm so
really?
excited. So that means the morels up the hill are going to be ready soon. The fiddleheads will be coming out, and so
Wow.
you see all the spring green coming out, and you know the food is going to change. And it's
Yeah.
only for 2 weeks that you get these beautiful things, but there's an excitement and there's a purity to like just following the season and eating with it.
Yeah.
And the thing I love so much, it's such a gentle time right now, you know,
Mhm.
the bird song and the greens are so light, but the foods that are coming out of the ground right now have worked incredibly hard to push themselves through. And so their flavor is reflective of the work that they've done. They're incredibly
Yeah.
redolent. They're very umami rich. They're just sharp and punchy. And it's
Right.
because they're like, damn it, I'm going to make it through first, and I'm going to be the best thing you've had all year. And it's just so exciting. And then you have you know, I
Yeah.
just look forward to every season, and every season is fantastic. And this year I will grow a giant pumpkin. I will. I will.
You're determined.
I'm determined.
I yeah, you're not killing this fantasy at all. This I really find myself also the getting I love people. I'm a New Yorker at heart and I'm in LA right now, but I'm really craving isolation. I'm fewer people at
Yeah.
least. I find myself on my iPad just looking at like cabins because
It,
just to be able to write and be by myself would be would be heaven.
it is very doable here. Very,
Yeah.
very doable here. And but that was my whole I did have a fantasy. My fantasy was we'd come here, I would open up a bakery, but I'd also be able to write. I wanted to do them both. And
Right.
this is what I had in my head. So in the morning I will bake, like, and which I did. So you wake
Yeah.
up at 3 in the morning and you bake. And I thought once everything is done, then I will be at front of the house, like, you know, like mom,
Uh-huh.
pa clamping, sitting there the
Yeah.
till, and I'll be writing, and once in a while someone will come in, ding, and I'll give them something. And I was like, no,
No
I was
way.
I was up at 3 in the morning and I was baking till 7 p.m. and it was like, oh,
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, that's
row.
all right, that's a
So
great segue into the second fantasy because when you do dabble in stuff is like, you know, I have this bread and I give it to people and everyone loves it and you have this quiet thing of like, oh, what would be another chapter if you were to open up a bakery, but I had this little show for like a beat where I went and spent time with bakers all around the country. I've never seen people work so hard in my life.
it,
It
it's intense work.
Yeah.
And if you decide that you want to do it in a place like this, it is not only intense work, it's unrelenting because you cannot take any time off, because if you're the one that's creating the recipes and doing everything, the workforce here is so small
Right.
and the turnover is so high that you are responsible 24/7 every day of the year, every
Oh,
day of the year.
man, oh, man.
And that's why you find a lot of businesses here like that, that they do have chunks of the year that they just take off. They're like, we're out.
Right. Right.
Otherwise you really burn out and you just can't do it. But that said, I still, even though we haven't had a shop for a while, that I still get that like prickly feeling of like, I want a storefront.
Yeah.
It's like, don't do it. Don't do it.
I know. It's like, yeah, it's a difficult thing because any kind of workaround that you have of, I just have good people and I can just, and you're, if you're doing it, you're doing it. There's no
Yeah.
way.
And there's some people who do it very well, who are very good at kind of creating a big workforce. And even here, so I have a friend, Eric Warnstead, who he is James Beard award-winning chef, and he has these amazing restaurants, and he's kind of stayed within like the Stowe Waterbury area, but he's able to, because he is so good at what he does, because he has such confidence, and the staff have such confidence in him, he's able to keep everything moving and shaking at a really high level
Right.
in this place, which is incredibly hard to do. He's an extraordinary human, and it's so great to
Yeah.
have someone like that here to look to and say, you need to have his drive and his gumption, because
Yeah.
and his incredible talent. And so
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm like, well, at least I have someplace great to go for dinner.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I know there's certain things in life, like you don't have to make all this stuff. You don't have to own every
Right.
home. You can visit, you can rent.
Yes, you can Airbnb that life.
Yeah,
You
right.
don't have to own it. 100%.
So when did you start baking?
I don't ever remember not baking.
Uh-huh.
We grew up vegetarian vegan.
Right.
That said, my mother was German, and so she had like, there's kind of like, I feel all Vermonters have baking in their blood. Most Germans do too, along with a lot of other stuff. And when she did bake, which was during the holidays, she was amazing. My grandmother was a great baker, but I was sugar obsessed since day one. So I just was like, people ask, who's your influence? Were you at your mother's knee? And I'm like, my mother was like this dynamic diva. She was like on tour. She was not going to be like sitting here
Yeah.
going, let me show you how to do this. She was like, screw you, get out of the kitchen. If I'm
Right.
going to bake, it's for me.
Uh-huh.
It's not the fantasy.
Yeah.
But my influence was the witch in Hansel and Gretel, because she had the best house ever. I kind of
Yeah.
ignored the whole cooking and eating children thing.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
all
like,
right.
that's all right. I was like, she's got some bad habits.
Everyone has
I
their
was
flaws.
I was fixated on her house, and I was like, dude, if I grow up, I want to be just like her. But I was just thinking of the house that she was building.
Yeah.
So I was like, what kind of cookies should I have for a roof? And like, what were the walls we left?
Yeah. It's amazing. So when your mom was when she was baking and not really guiding you, she was baking with no butter?
Oh, she would do, when she would bake, she would go all in. It
Oh,
was,
okay.
so that was usually for the holidays. So for the holidays, all bets were off.
Okay.
All things were good. And then we would go to Germany in the summertime, and then she couldn't control us because we were staying with our family, and they were
Right.
like vegan schmegan, and it was like meats, cheese, and like dairy. Everything was, all the good
Yeah.
things were there.
My
And so
my
yeah.
daughter's going through a vegan streak now. I don't know if I can even call it a phase. It's been a couple of years now. And she used to bake. She used to come into the kitchen and bake biscuits or cookies just like really quickly. She had a real aptitude for it. And I have to, good on her, but it pains me that
Yeah.
there's no butter in her baking anymore.
Yeah, it is. Butter is beautiful. It is such a great thing.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, the veganism was also a totally different animal. It was macrobiotic. It was all gray. I don't remember a day going to school without a stomach ache. It was just one of those things that
Oh,
now life is just in the world of veganism. It's so much more flavorful, and there's so much more choice, and there's so much more
yeah.
knowledge. My
Yeah.
mother was an incredibly knowledgeable woman, and she did all this study, but it was just not good.
Right.
It was good, not good.
Why did she do it back then? What was it, animal or was it health?
It was health mainly. She was very fixated on health, and she was also a marathon runner.
Right.
In her 50s, she was diagnosed with metastatic colon cancer. So it's one of those things. It's like,
Right.
man,
Yeah.
oh man, like she did everything. She never drank, she never smoked. She was the healthiest human.
Wow.
And it's like, and when she died and I was still in LA, I was like, life is clearly too short to
Yeah.
not do the thing that you know will mean the most to you and that
Mhm.
will make you a better person. I honestly was looking to just not feel so icky within myself.
Mhm.
If that makes sense. Like I was like, I don't like the person I am here. I don't like who I'm supposed to be in LA. So
Mhm.
I was like, I want to be able to kind of reset and start over and just be the kind of person that I wanted to be when I was a child.
And you knew that baking was a big part of that.
I did. I did.
Yeah.
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 I
What
because I am very Vermonter-esque, and it's leave me alone. How can I help? But when I'm baking, but specifically when I'm teaching baking, I am the best version of me in that I love teaching people. I love sharing my knowledge,
Mhm.
and I almost feel that we don't have kids, but I'm a mother to my students, and it's usually like all middle-aged people.
Right.
I feel very motherly towards them. I'm like, I
Yeah.
want you to, because it's a very vulnerable thing to be of a certain age and say, I'm just going to take some time for myself right now.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to know everything, and you've been taking care of other people, uh, and I love just having people in and go, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to help you take care of yourself. And this is your time. You don't have to take
Mhm.
care of anybody else. You can just learn a new thing. And I'm here to help you do that.
I watched this documentary on Stephen Sondheim the other night,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize what a teacher he was. He, he wrote all these amazing musicals and just like this mind and this knowledge, but his greatest love, I would say, at the end of it was teaching other people. And the way he described teaching people was that you're just stirring up curiosity. You're giving
Yeah.
them all your knowledge and giving them enough bait that they're going to take it and then move forward and start their journey. It was such a nice way to describe it.
That's beautiful. It is.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. And I think when people often think teaching that it's going to be this very kind of mundane and very dry, but it's
Yeah.
teaching. I mean, you're teaching sugar, flour, butter. I mean, it's just fabulous. It's just a fabulous thing to be around.
Yeah.
It's alchemy too. It's like there's something incredibly magic about baking because unlike savory cooking, which I still love to do, which I always love to do, is that when you're cooking, like you can still point out that's beef, that's a pepper.
Yeah.
And in baking, you're taking these disparate ingredients that have their own life, and then you put them together, and it comes up as something entirely new. And you
Yeah.
hope something good.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it's something entirely awful if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. The there are some things I wanted to ask you if you think back to like you can Airbnb certain things or you can make a reservation in certain places.
Yeah.
If you're just a home baker, uh, should you just go to the shop and pick up a croissant, or should you make a croissant? You don't have a laminator. You don't have.
I think that's one of the classes I find most interesting teaching
Uh-huh.
because almost everyone who bakes wants to make a croissant.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing they want to do.
Yeah.
And you have to back them out of it a little and say
Uh-huh.
it's 3 days. You just say, let's just put that in there. It's 3 days.
Right.
And also you have to make some adjustments for the fact that you don't have a the equipment
Yeah.
that would make all of this process so much easier. You
Right.
just don't.
No,
And so
exactly.
there's some things that you just have to allow for. And
Yeah.
then it's like if you're ready for that, then this is how you do it.
Right. It can
And
be done.
but it can be done. And I think it is the ultimate test for baking because always say the first ingredient in baking is patience. That is a thing that you have to live by in
Yeah.
baking.
Yeah.
And that is one of the like preeminent tests of are you truly committed to baking correctly? And if you are, bread is very similar, but croissant is with the whole lamination process, there's just more time involved.
Yeah.
But I think it's a wonderful thing to go to try, but I really think you've got to set your mind right before you get into it because a lot of people get really pissed off about it.
Right.
Right? They like it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like don't be that way.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just know you need a few days.
I
And
had
now
some
you'll appreciate that croissant so much more once
yeah.
you try it yourself.
I had some friends that wanted to learn how to bake bread, and I was like, same thing. Well, it's 3 days. You're gonna from the time you take out your starter and you feed it, and then you could just see them just glaze over, like, all right, I'm just gonna eat your bread. But I have a thing where I was always cooking, and I wasn't really thinking baking. To me, baking was always this precision, clean, mathematical pursuit that I don't carry in any other part of my life. And then when I found bread, when a friend turned me on to just how that's all done, I feel like it's kind of in between. Like
Mhm.
you're kind of cooking, but you're a little more precise, but there's still some room. It's not like I'm making a delicate pastry.
Yeah.
Uh, how in your mind is bread closer to cooking or baking?
I, I agree with you on how your approach to it can be. There's a lot of feel that goes with bread.
Yeah,
There's a lot of feel just with hydration, with just so many factors that are going on in your environment.
yeah.
Um, just the proof alone is it's a master class in, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really true. It's really sometimes you walk in and you think you have the schedule from the last time you did it, and you walk in and it's tripled in
You're like,
size. You're
what
like,
happened?
what happened?
It's an interesting thing. I feel like it's one of those things that you can really get fixated in. I think it could be I think bread can be a problem simply because it can enthrall you so much.
Yeah,
Sourdough specifically because of its magical life of its own.
yeah,
There is something so wonderful and addictive to making bread. There really is.
yeah.
I think when the pandemic first started, when everything started to lock down, I was in New Orleans and I was supposed to be making a show called Best Baker in America. And I was judging that. And we got one shot off. And
Whoa.
they broke us out. They said, go back to your trailers. And I'm like, oh, that's weird.
Oh boy.
That's
No
strange. And they
way.
said, we are shutting down. Literally, we just did the first intro, like, this is the show. And then they were like,
Ah,
go no. And
ah,
so we were expecting to be in New Orleans for months. And so the three judges and it was Carla Hall, who I'm sure you know, me and Jason Smith. I said, well, I'm staying in a house. Let's make biscuits together because we all have very different styles of that. And so I went to get flour at the Whole Foods, and I noticed that all the King Arthur flour was almost all gone.
yeah.
And I thought, this is very strange. And I'm like, and to myself, I said, my people need me.
Yeah.
And so what happened, we drove back from New Orleans to Vermont, and I called Jeffrey Hamelman right away. And I said, Jeffrey, you and I are going to help our people because there is something that is clearly nascent within it seemed
Yeah.
everyone, because everybody immediately, their first instinct was get flour, get yeast.
Yeah.
It was this
Immediate.
people who didn't bake at all,
Yeah.
their first instinct was, I need to start baking.
Yeah.
And you
Weird.
could feel it. And I understand that. And I understand it, but I understood too that of the frustration of people who were like, I just couldn't bake bread. It's like,
Right.
it takes longer than that. And so I enlisted both King Arthur and Jeffrey, and I said, listen, we're going to do a live show where we teach people how to bake. You'll do the bread, I'll do the pastry,
Right.
so that people will have so we will hold their hand and guide them.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that we were having Jeffrey teach people just in his, he is literally a master baker. We only have a handful in the United States who are a master baker, giving his time
Right.
to show all of his knowledge. And it's like, it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It was such a great
It's
thing. But it is
amazing.
but he's one of those people that he can break that news to you that you're going to need a few days to do this. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't question him. You're like, yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir. I'll take those few days.
Yeah. We're thrilled to partner with Aura. Aura is an all-in-one online safety solution that helps protect you and your family from identity theft, financial fraud, and online threats before they happen. With Aura, you can rest easy knowing that someone is looking out for you. The app scans the dark web to look for your email addresses, passwords, social security numbers, and other sensitive information, And if anything is found, you'll receive an alert in real time. If you're a victim of ID theft, their experienced white glove fraud resolution team will help you navigate credit bureaus, help you initiate credit freezes or lock, and work with you around the clock to resolve it. Aura also helps reduce annoying robocalls, telemarketers, and junk mail by sending takedown requests on your behalf regularly. I mean, look, every single aspect of our life is just out there. And you see like these major corporations and stuff being taken down, and all the information just spewing everywhere, credit cards. I mean, it's only a matter of time. So it just makes sense to have somebody at your back, watching your back, and it's just going to be a part of our life. So why not join up with a good organization like Aura? And now, for a limited time, Aura is offering our listeners a 14-day trial, plus a check of your data to see if your personal information has been leaked online, all for free when you visit aura.com/papa. That's aura.com/papa, P-A-P-A, to sign up for the free 14-day free trial and start protecting you and your loved ones. That's Aura, AURA.com/papa. Certain terms apply, so be sure to check the site for details. Do you think there is something innate in you that makes you such a good baker that you, and then we'll get into the foods that are a part of your book, but just in the baking end of it, did you have a natural traits in you?
I think I'm naturally inclined.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't mean, but that said, I the other thing that was in me, because I have such a keen interest in it, and has been I would say my number one interest my whole life,
Yeah.
aside from boys. When I was a kid.
Right.
Baking and boys, those two were like, ooh. And later on beer. So it's
Yeah.
the 3 Bs. That my interest in it was so keen that I just kept practicing. So I think I was
Right.
naturally good at it. I wasn't naturally great. I got great because I practiced and I wanted to practice. And I know the difference, because I was naturally adept at music, and I was a naturally adept pianist. I hated it. And my mother, the German, made me practice all the time. And it was just like, I was fine, but I wasn't great because I had no interest. My interest, though, was in baking. And so I will practice and practice and practice with glee to get better and better and better. And that's one of the things that people have to understand, that to get great, you need those 10,000 hours. You just do. You do.
I know.
You do.
There's no shortcut.
There are no shortcuts. Sometimes tools will help. And that's no lie. Like a sheeter to do laminated dough will improve your croissant game quite a bit.
Yeah.
But aside from that, putting in the hours and the genuine work, and meaningful work, and that you really have to be there. You have to be thoughtful about it. You have to be present, and you have to want to do it. And you can't be grumpy about the fact that some things take 3 days.
When you move into cooking, do you find it? I mean, there's probably, in the Vermont angle of it, you are part of nature. It's seasonal. So these things are coming up and it's exciting. When it's time to actually make this thing, then you're excited to make that thing. And it's got to be pretty gratifying and motivating. Do you have as much joy in that, in the cooking end of it?
I do. It's a different joy. And it's a different joy because it's kind of this, you're riffing off of things, you're playing, you're able to in the moment change the flavor profile. You can you're tasting and you're changing. And there's something so lovely about that. When you're baking, you're doing all of that in your head first, right? You're doing a lot of calculations first here and going, these are the flavor profiles I'm going for. And then you kind of set it in your brain, and then you make it. And you do taste, but you can't make a lot of changes along the way.
No, yeah. It's a good way to put it.
But being able to kind of perform that jazz of of savory cooking can just be such a liberation. And I was talking to Joanne Chang, who has the flour bakeries in Boston. She and I were talking about approaching savory and baking, because we're both bakers, we're both pastry
Right.
chefs, and that's where we live professionally, but we're both very avid cooks, and how it's kind of liberating to be able to play, and then
Yeah.
to write about it too, because all my cookbooks have been baking oriented. To write about it is like, it's
Yeah.
like, what is this silliness I'm doing?
Right.
And when you write in baking, you write in grams, and I naturally do that when I cook. And the publisher was like, "We're taking all the grams out." I'm like, don't take out my grams. And they're like, people aren't going to even pay attention to that. I'm like, ah.
I got to make Pop-Tarts with her when she was one of the bakers I visited in
Oh,
Boston, and she made homemade Pop-Tarts with me.
she's so great.
She's
She's
so
so
great.
fun.
Yeah. There is something very satisfying though of when you get to like especially when you're serving, that you could actually bring everybody from the meal all the way through, and
Yeah.
then know
Yes.
that you have that big thing like
Yes.
waiting for them.
That's absolutely right. And
Yeah.
there is something to bread. And that's going back to, like, clearly we have it ingrained. It's kind of this genetic predisposition to go to bread in order to find comfort. And it's one of those, it is the hallmark of humanity, this fermentation. And
Yeah.
so being able to be a real part of it, not being estranged from it, is something that is so satisfying, so soul satisfying, that I think is just such a part of humanity, and part of what, just kind of the whole agricultural aspect of it, the fermentation of it. It's kind of one of the reasons we've got big brains,
Yeah.
it's just the process itself is so magical and beautiful. And it makes me want to have community ovens again, so that people can bring their, their breads, and then you fire it up in the community oven, and you like score it per your family, or your household.
Amazing.
And that would be just like the best thing ever.
Is there a showcase from the book, meal wise, that you would recommend that I tackle first, like a showstopper?
Well, the Wellington.
Right.
The Wellington, absolutely, because it is one of those things that it brings all the skills to bear.
Right.
So it's an inverse puff, which is, people are the most freaked out about this puff, and it's the best, and it's not that hard.
What makes it an inverse puff?
In that the butter block is on the outside.
Oh.
So you lock in the dough on the inside, and the butter block is on the outside. And so that's intimidating, because you think, butter on the outside, how dare you? And you're rolling it out and you're doing folds and turns, and you're like, yeah, it works. And it has a much more refined taste and texture. And so it's one of those things that if you've ever like tried to get through a puff pastry and it's taken a little bit of work to get through, it's usually not an inverse puff. An inverse puff is one of those puffs that, like, if you like a millefeuille Napoleon, if you're cutting through it, it just like, it shatters for you. It's like, welcome home. You go straight through. And then I make that for the Wellington, and I just but that part of me that wants to give you all the information is right there with the Wellington. It's like, this is how you get the perfect meat.
Yeah,
it's a hidden meat, right?
Right. I was just gonna say that you can't see.
You can't see it. And so all the tips and tricks are in the book about how to navigate that, and specifically how to navigate it if people have a different temperature preference. So like, usually in a restaurant, you would get it pretty rare, or close to. Some people just want it medium, which I think is totally, this is my preference. And so the trick to do that without over baking the puff is all there.
Right.
And it's so good.
That's amazing. What is in season right now at the end of mud season that's reflected in the book?
So right now, all things maple, clearly. That is, but now we're pushing through. The ramps are coming up. The morels are starting to percolate.
Right.
The fiddleheads are also, but my wild chives are also, they're crazy heads have already, they're all like, hello. It's like jazz hands. The second there's like, even there's still snow, and they're like, yeah, yeah.
Have you met the potato? The potato's here.
And then, so those things are all starting to percolate, and they're just so pungent and fantastic. And I'll literally just go outside and start grabbing things and eating them because they're so perky and lively and just fantastically vibrant. All those things are just coming around, and then that means the rhubarb is not far behind.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So you're maple. You're maple obsessed. Were you maple obsessed before you got to Vermont?
I was not as, I mean, you can never be as maple obsessed.
Yeah.
Because you can love it, you can revere it, but you can't really be as obsessed unless you're living in a place where you kind of breathe it during the season.
Yeah.
And if you make it yourself, you truly become not only an aficionado, but you do become obsessed about how are they tapping? When are they, like, you're watching when everybody is starting in. This year, some people were like, had a couple weeks in January. You're like, should we tap now? Should we not? What are we gonna do? It's like the whole Spider-Man thing. You're like, and we're convinced that our trees are hundreds of years old that we tap. We're convinced they make the most buttery maple syrup ever. And then you also get access to things that most people around the country don't. So most people just get the golden or amber, the very light stuff. But we have access to dark and very dark.
Oh.
And that's the stuff that you bake with. That's the stuff that a Vermonter would actually, the syrup that you actually put on your pancakes, because it tastes so deeply of maple. And it is literally like, it can get tar black. And it's the end of the season run where the sugar content is so high, and it's just fabulous.
Wow.
It's
my
just
wife,
great stuff.
when I first started dating my wife, she was a syrup snob. And we were in New York, and she would be like asking for the real maple syrup.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is she doing? Like, why is she really grilling this poor waiter? And she's like, no, I really want, is it real? Is it real maple? And they didn't even know the question, really.
Like, what are you talking about?
Man, did she educate me, and she ruined my taste buds and my daughter's. There's like,
that's not ruining.
What I grew, yeah, that's a good point.
They were ruined before.
They were ruined. My mother actually ruined them by saying that was real syrup when I was a child.
How dare she? No, I have people from all around the world come to my classes, and I had some Canadians come in, and they'll stay the weekend and come take classes, and they went to breakfast beforehand, and they came in a mood. And I'm like, what happened? They're like, well, we went to the thing, and we had the syrup, and they were like, it is not real. How can this be?
Oh no.
I was like, I suddenly became as incensed as they are. I'm like, yes, how can it be? Why would a Vermont place not have real maple syrup?
Where do you do your classes, and how often do you do classes? Are you still doing classes?
Yeah, I'm still doing classes. We have we live in a 1700s tavern that is no longer a tavern. But next to it is the old carriage house where the carriages would come through. It was a stagecoach stop, and it is now enclosed, and that's where the school is. So it's like it literally abuts the house. So it's kind of a part of it. So instead of like getting everyone tipsy and from the stagecoaches, we're getting them high on sugar and butter.
That's amazing. How often do you teach?
Most weekends. I also still teach at King Arthur Flower. So yeah.
Wow. Is King Arthur in Vermont?
Yeah, it is. It's a Vermont company, and it's like 15 minutes from me. King Arthur Flowers in Norwich, Vermont.
I don't know why I always had it in the Midwest in my head.
There are some Red Star yeast, the Safra yeast is in the Midwest and Wisconsin, but King Arthur is they're a Vermont company since the 1800s. I want to say 1700s maybe.
It's amazing how many times I'll talk to bakers and you talk about getting into different flours and different kind of stuff. How many people who you'd expect to be like, no, I only get mine from wherever, from this sacred valley, or They all come back and they're like, King Arthur.
It is. I mean, it is the benchmark pastry chef and baker's flour because of the quality and also because the guaranteed percentages. It's the only company that does that. So
Right.
and I have a lot of students who, some people don't have access to it, which is incredibly sad, and I'm very sorry. But I have students who like have recipes and they write and they're like, I used exactly the same stuff and it all went a certain way differently. And my first question is, you're not using King Arthur flour. I know that.
Right.
So what happens is that the flour companies that cannot guarantee percentages, it will literally change by 2 or 3 percentages based on hard wheat, soft wheat, summer wheat, winter wheat, right? So
Right.
their mix will change by percentages in the protein content, and it will change your recipe. It will change your recipe.
Right. Yeah. Of
Especially
course.
people who are very good bakers who are very sensitive to the changes in and more gluten will, if you are used to mixing at a certain rate and a certain time, will make a tougher product. It
Right.
will, because there's a
Yeah.
higher, and vice versa. And so that's why King Arthur is just like, because it's so high quality and it's like there's a guarantee there.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a bit of a side note, but I was just in London and I was doing a show and I was walking through the theater district. There's actually a musical now in London for the Great British Bake Off. They've turned it into a musical.
I hate musicals. I totally see that musical. I
know.
totally see that musical. Oh, that's funny.
Is that hilarious?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh
I could
God,
just
I love that
imagine them
show. That's fabulous.
breaking into song.
You can imagine them doing it on the show.
I
It wouldn't be
know.
like a weird thing for them to do it there.
I know. It is a weird thing. I find it weird that that show is so great and so like the pace is great, the kindness is
Yeah.
so great. And then
Yeah.
you throw on our networks with food and it's so cutthroat, in your face,
Yeah.
quick clip, you suck, we win. I'm just
Yeah. It's about
yeah.
it must I can only think that the ratings must be fabulous. Otherwise they wouldn't be doing it all the time. But there is a
No,
reason
yeah.
that people are so taken by the Great British Bake Off. There's a reason.
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
usually, and people who are usually more thoughtful and really in-depth bakers watch that show.
Right.
That's a show
Exactly.
they'll go to because
Yeah.
they understand it, and I think bakers are at their hearts just very collectively very kind and giving people.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You don't open up a cupcake shop in town if you're if you don't care about people.
Right.
Right?
Yes. And yeah, and it is definitely like for me, because my goal was like I want to be the person that I wanted to be as a child. It's like
Right.
baking is a path to that, because baking is if you are like a more reticent human and you're not able to show people how you feel, baking is one way to like, it's literally a way to show your love. You're like, I am not very good at expressing these things.
Yeah.
I might look like I hate you, but
Right.
here I shall show you through a baked good
Yeah.
that I'm not
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter.
It's a Hallmark card that you can eat.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, really, I care. Seriously.
Well, you definitely paint a great picture, I have to say. Maybe I'll Airbnb in Vermont.
Yeah,
That'll be my
Airbnb
baby
in
step.
Vermont. It will, and you can do it for a longer time. It's a great place to write. We got
Yeah.
a lot of good writers here who like made their way. Robert
Is
Frost didn't spend a lot of time here for no reason.
yeah. David Mamet,
David Mamet. Yep,
he's
he's
big
a Northeast
Vermont.
Kingdom boy. Yeah.
Yeah. This is your sixth book?
This is my seventh book, my sixth
Seventh book.
cookbook. My first
Okay.
book was a baking memoir, Confections of a Closet Master Baker, and that one that was my very first book. Was the
Wow.
memoir.
Amazing.
It has recipes in it too, but it was written as a memoir.
Right. Do you, when by the time the book comes out, uh, and congratulations again on it, are you already thinking of what's next, or do you give yourself some time off to let it happen?
This one is different than the other ones because it is savory and I feel like I want to live in it a while longer,
Mm-hmm.
because I literally lived this for a year so happily.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm still feeling a joy in it, and I literally will still bake and cook from it. It's like one
Right.
of those, it's really strange that with a baking book, because it's usually so much more technical and like you're really like, you have to be so on it. It's like it's big brain work. Not that
Yeah.
this wasn't.
Yeah.
This was far more a labor of love, and it was so joyful, and it it makes me happy to talk about, because it's also stories of what it's like here and what I find so beautiful here, and
Right.
stories of the animals we raise. And
Right.
um I kind of wrote it, I almost went back to my memoir, in that the way I wrote it was so much more, um I wrote it more literarily.
Uh-huh. That's nice. I
Yeah.
like that. It do you collect cookbooks? Do you when I find cookbooks like that, I read them like novels.
and
Even
and that, yeah, and I know that's kind of how I wrote it, and that's
yeah.
kind of the nice thing about the way it's structured through those 6 seasons, is that it does take you through the journey of living here for a year.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, the great thing about being in Vermont too is that, most state cookbooks would be just for the state that it's written about. Vermont has this thing about it that you just say it, the word Vermont, and people get the feeling. They get all these very sweet, comforted feelings,
Yeah.
that it is this vibe. It's a way of kind of creating this kind of simplicity and loveliness at home. And it's a thing that I needed when I was in LA. It's a thing that I was trying to conjure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I had had this book, I would have been able to somehow conjure moments like in the fall when I wasn't getting the fall I
Right.
wanted. I
Yeah.
would be able to at least replicate some of it through food,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Well said. Well said. Well, congratulations. This was really a treat. I was looking forward to it, and you did not disappoint.
you come Airbnb Vermont. We are here. And there's so much bread to be made and had.
Yeah. I'll be flying across the country with my starter on my lap.
you, you be good. You wouldn't be the only person who's like running around with their starter.
Yeah. Hilarious. Well, thank you so much. This was really great.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Congratulations.
you.
And I can't wait to see you again.
Come visit.
All right, I will. Okay, everybody, that was our big show. Thank you so much to Gesine. It was a great interview, not because of the person asking the questions, because she just has such a great story to tell. It really makes me want to go to Vermont in a huge way. But I'll use her book in the meantime and bake stuff. Maybe an Airbnb. Maybe an Airbnb in a cabin near where she is baking things. That's not too creepy. Just having a comedian show up and just pulling the blinds. Hey, guess who's moved in next door? But thank you so much for being here. Go get her book, My Vermont Table. Go to tompapa.com. My book is actually available for pre-order right now. We're all in this together, so make some room. We have a bunch of book events coming up. We're going to let you know all about that. Of course, out on tour. We have tickets available in Chicago, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Cleveland, a whole bunch of great places. So go to tompapa.com for all of that. You guys are the best. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.